In general, I think there's been challenges in each of these markets on different sides of the supply chain. Like Michigan, you're right, did have more licensing available in terms of retail, but what happened there was constraint in supply. They did not have
Right.
enough cultivation and manufacturing online, and so it just becomes very difficult to make sure you've got the right product assortment and representation on the shelves if you are a retailer, and then also the pricing challenges that happen around that if you have to navigate those markets. It happened in Illinois, it happened in Michigan, it continues to be a challenge there. So it's interesting. I think about Michigan too. I think it does have a very strong illicit market. A lot of us kind of think of it as the California of the Midwest in terms of having a lot of that legacy notion of being preferring to shop in an illicit market rather than going into the regulated and legal stores. So I think that continues to be a pervasive problem, and I think it could be suppressing a little bit of the growth in the market. But year over year, it's still really exciting.
So I think one of the cool things about Illinois that I hear from the MSOs is a lot of them have set up stores right on the border of, like Cresco has one in Wisconsin, several down right by St. Louis. I think Merrimed has one near Kentucky. Forefront has one in Indiana. Jushi is one of the ones downstate. Ascend as well in Collinsville. Yep. So these stores are killing it. It's pulling in traffic where people don't even have medical in some of those states. So I think that's an interesting part of the growth there. But definitely huge shortage of stores. I think they're almost all open finally. It's about 110 is where they are now. It's way too few. If you look at Colorado, smaller state, lots more dispensaries. It's crazy. And of course, the social equity part, I mean, this is a travesty.
Yeah, and I think we think about this a lot because, you mentioned Collinsville. I mean, that store has traditionally had a line to get in, and many of the stores in those locations that you were talking about do, because there's just not enough doors per capita. And so, in traditional retail, you think about removing friction to purchase. And a friction to purchase is absolutely having to wait in a line and then wondering if by the time you get into the store, because of the supply challenges, if the products that you went and got in line for will actually be in the door. Now, a lot of stores do have order ahead, and there are ways to get around this and ways as retailers to improve the velocity through the door. And so those are really important. And also to, have more reliable menus so people do know what they're able to get access to. But all of those things are friction points to closing every single sale. So.
Yeah. And with the recent news of the tax revenue too, you think there'd be some incentive to kind of scale this thing out faster? I believe it was for the first time at Q1 of this year where cannabis sales, or tax revenue from cannabis sales outpaced liquor tax revenue for the first time. It was about 86 million coming from cannabis and about 72 million coming from liquor. So, I mean, that's a great headline too, right? One of the reasons, why we're so pro legalization is, to be able to tax it and regulate it. And, those taxes go to great things like schools and other, important aspects that would have, in markets where there is no framework, cannabis still sells, it's
Yep.
black market. And unfortunately, there's no ability to capture that tax revenue. So you'd think a market like Illinois that, has some decent growth and can be a sizable tax base income for them.
I think the investor takeaway, though, should be extremely positive. I mean, there's the supply side that Emily alluded to as well. There wasn't a lot of capital a year ago. Obviously, we were right at the trough of the stock market as well as the peak of the pandemic fears before it was exactly a year ago, maybe a little bit earlier, that we realized being an essential service is actually a very positive thing. And so a lot of the capacity that's been being built out, it's being scaled up right now. So we will get those new stores and we will have more capacity because it's both sides of the equation.
Listen to High Rise on all major streaming platforms and watch the visual on YouTube.